They told him to pick one of the two Apache slaves as a reward. He looked at them and chose both. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
The trading yard lies just beyond the last row of buildings, where the town gives up and the ground turns uneven and scarred by wagon ruts, hoof prints, and weeks of careless traffic. The rain that passed through before dawn has pressed the dust flat, leaving the earth dark and firm underfoot, and the air carries a cold bite that keeps breath visible and tempers short. Horses stand tied along the fence, heads low, tails flicking lazily, leather straps creaking each time an animal shifts its weight. Men move in small groups, boots scraping, coats hanging open, voices rising and falling in rough bursts that sound confident but feel thin when listened to closely. Michael Cole stands several steps away from the center of it all, close enough to hear every word, but far enough that no one brushes against him by accident. He has learned to keep that distance over the years. He is in his late 30s, built lean from long stretches on the trail rather than strength earned in one place. His face weathered by sun and wind, his dark hair cut short and already touched with gray at the temples. His wool coat is faded and worn smooth at the elbows, the kind of wear that comes from use, not neglect. His hands hang loose at his sides, fingers relaxed, his posture steady and grounded, showing neither eagerness nor reluctance. Michael is here because he finished the job he was hired to do. For weeks, he escorted a supply caravan through contested land, guiding merchants who paid well but asked few questions, keeping them alive when roads narrowed and threats grew real. His work was not about heroics or reputation. It was about getting people from one place to another without bodies left behind. He accepted the contract because it kept him moving and kept his past where it belonged, behind him, unspoken. The trading yard is meant to be the final stop, the last formality before he rides out again alone. The men who promised the reward speak loudly, too loudly for the quiet morning, explaining the arrangement as if Michael needs to be convinced of its fairness. They mention danger faced, risks taken, losses avoided. Their words blur together, and Michael listens without interrupting, tracking tone more than content, noticing how often they glance at each other for approval. He feels a familiar tension settle into his chest, not fear exactly, but caution. Deals that come with extra enthusiasm usually carry something underneath. When the explanation ends, two Apache women are brought forward from the edge of the yard. A man grips the rope that binds their wrists, guiding them a few steps closer and then stopping. The rope is tight, rough fiber biting into skin already marked by long travel. Michael's attention sharpens without him meaning it to. He notices how neither woman stumbles, how their backs remain straight despite exhaustion, how they hold themselves with a quiet control that does not ask for permission. The taller woman, Naya, stands slightly angled, her body positioned just enough to shield the younger one from the wind. Her dark hair is pulled back in a simple tie, strands loose around her face, her eyes alert and steady as they scan the space ahead rather than the men who surround them. Her expression is firm, guarded, shaped by someone who has learned when to show strength and when to conserve it. Michael recognizes that look. It belongs to people who survive by staying aware. Beside her stands Thule, younger and slighter, her movements careful, measured. A split lip has dried into a dark line at the corner of her mouth, and bruising shadows her cheek, but her chin remains lifted. Her eyes do not dart or plead. They stay forward, focused, holding on to control in the only way left to her. Michael feels a tight pull in his chest at the sight, a reaction he does not allow to show. He has seen fear before. This is not that. This is endurance. The men explain the choice plainly. Pick one. Take her as part of the reward. The other will stay. The words are spoken casually, as if they're discussing livestock or spare gear. Michael feels a slow, rising pressure behind his ribs, a mix of anger held in check and a deep unease that has nothing to do with danger and everything to do with recognition. He thinks of past roads, past compromises, moments when staying silent meant something was allowed to happen. He does not move. He does not speak. The silence stretches longer than the men expect. Michael keeps his eyes on the women, not out of assessment, but respect. He sees Naya's jaw tighten, just slightly, and Tuli's breath deepen as if preparing for whatever comes next. He understands, in that quiet moment, that his decision will change more than his own path. The weight of it settles heavy but clear. Fear passes through him, not a conflict, but of becoming someone who looks away. When he speaks, his voice is calm, steady, carrying across the yard without force. He states his choice once. Both of them. No explanation follows. He does not justify himself or argue terms. He knows that explaining invites debate, and debate invites delay. The words land hard. The laughter stops. The men exchange uncertain looks, their confidence slipping as they realize this is not a negotiation. There is resistance, brief and poorly masked, but it fades under the certainty of Michael's stillness. He does not shift his stance. He does not raise his voice. Eventually, the rope is handed to him, the transfer done with slower movements now, caution replacing ease. Michael takes the rope and immediately loosens it, not freeing the women entirely yet, but easing the strain. He does not look back at the men as he turns toward his horse. Naya and Tuli follow him without being told, keeping a respectful distance, their steps quiet on the damp ground. Michael feels their presence behind him, not as a burden, but as a responsibility he has chosen fully. He does not know what comes next, only that leaving them there was never an option he could live with. As they move toward the edge of the yard, the noise behind them fades, replaced by the open road and the unfamiliar weight of a decision that feels heavy, necessary, and final. They leave the town without announcement, moving past the last weathered building where the boardwalk ends and the road opens into open ground scored by wagon tracks and runoff channels from the night rain. The air feels cleaner here, cooler, carrying the smell of damp earth and horse sweat instead of smoke and old drink. Michael mounts first, not as a signal of control but out of habit, settling into the saddle with practiced ease, his movements efficient and quiet. He waits until both women are positioned behind him before urging the horse forward, keeping the pace slow enough that walking does not become strain. For the first stretch of road, no one speaks. Michael keeps his attention forward, eyes tracking the line of hills ahead, checking the sky for signs of weather and the ground for fresh disturbance. He is aware of the women behind him without turning, measuring their distance by sound and rhythm rather than sight. Each footstep is controlled, neither dragging nor rushed, and that steadiness eases something tight in his chest that he did not realize he was holding. After a mile, the town noise disappears completely. Only wind remains, brushing low grass and rattling loose fence wires somewhere off to the side. Michael brings the horse to a stop near a shallow cut in the land where water has collected, clear enough to drink. He dismounts, fills his canteen, then sets it on a flat stone within easy reach of the women without offering it directly. He steps back again, giving space, his posture open but reserved. Naya watches him closely as she kneels to drink, her movements alert, testing more than the water. She notices how he turns slightly away while she drinks, how his hand rests near his belt but never tightens. Tuli drinks next, slower, wiping her mouth with the back of her sleeve, her eyes lifting briefly to meet Michael's before dropping again. The exchange is silent, but something shifts. The first decision on the road has been made without force. As they continue, Michael adjusts the pace to match them more precisely, shortening his stride when the ground grows uneven, choosing routes that avoid steep climbs or loose stone. He is conscious of the rope still binding their wrists, aware that removing it too soon could startle rather than help. He waits until they stop again near a stand of low trees where the wind cuts less sharply. There, with no audience and no urgency, he draws his knife and cuts the rope cleanly, letting it fall to the ground without ceremony. Neither woman reacts immediately. Naya rolls her wrists slowly, checking circulation, then steps back a fraction, maintaining distance. Tuli gathers the rope and tosses it aside, her breath releasing in a way that suggests restraint rather than relief. Michael sheathes the knife and turns away, signaling that the act carries no expectation. He feels the tension ease slightly, replaced by a cautious awareness that trust, once offered, must be held carefully. They make camp before dusk in a shallow dip protected from the worst of the wind. Michael builds the fire small and controlled, using dry wood he carries rather than stripping the nearby trees. He sets out food plainly, dividing portions without comment. Naya takes charge of cooking with quiet efficiency, her hands steady as she works, while Thule organizes their limited supplies, placing items where they will be easy to reach later. Michael watches from a distance, noting how they move without argument, how their coordination speaks of long familiarity. As darkness settles, the fire casts low light across their faces, revealing fatigue that daylight hid. Michael feels the weight of the day settle into his shoulders, along with the understanding that turning back is no longer possible. He does not regret the choice, but he recognizes the risk, not just from outside threats, but from the responsibility of carrying others forward. Across the fire, Naya meets his gaze briefly, her expression unreadable but steady, and in that moment he understands that whatever lies ahead will be faced together, not by agreement or promise, but by the simple act of continuing down the same road. Morning arrives without warmth, the light thin and colorless as it spreads across the open land, revealing a low stretch of grass broken by shallow gullies and scattered rock. Michael is awake before the women stir, sitting a short distance from the dying fire with his coat pulled close, listening to the quiet that comes before movement. He studies the horizon and works through decisions he has not spoken aloud yet, measuring distance to the next water source, estimating how long it will take to reach ground where they can leave the main trail behind. Staying visible for too long carries its own danger. He rises and moves with purpose, stamping out the last embers and packing their gear without noise. When Naya opens her eyes, she does not startle. She watches him for a moment, reading his movements, then sits up and begins gathering her things, as if the order of the morning has already been agreed upon. Thule wakes more slowly, rubbing stiffness from her wrists, her gaze lingering on the empty space where the rope once was, confirming again that it is gone. They eat little, conserving supplies without discussion. Michael divides the portions carefully, aware of their condition and his own reserves, choosing restraint over comfort. He mounts after checking the saddle straps twice, then waits while the women adjust their pace behind him. The ground ahead narrows into a faint track that bends away from the wider road, and Michael guides them onto it without announcing the change. He knows this land well enough to trust instinct over markers. As the hours pass, the terrain shifts. Grass gives way to firmer ground, broken by clusters of stone and scrub that offer cover but limit visibility. Michael dismounts at intervals to check signs along the path, crouching low, fingers brushing soil and broken stems. Naya watches closely, beginning to recognize what he looks for, pointing out disturbances before he finishes scanning. When she speaks the first time, her voice is quiet and precise, drawing his attention to a set of tracks crossing their route. Michael nods once, acknowledging the contribution without surprise. Thule remains slightly behind during these stops, not from hesitation but from attention to detail, keeping their supplies balanced, adjusting straps, ensuring nothing drags or rattles. Michael notices how she keeps order without drawing focus, how her actions reduce risk without needing instruction. It is a different kind of strength, one he recognizes from long stretches of survival where chaos costs more than hunger. By midday, the sun lifts higher but offers little warmth. They stop near a rocky outcrop that shields them from open view, and Michael checks the women for signs of strain, noting the stiffness in Thule's steps and the tension held in Naya's shoulders. He offers rest without framing it as concern, setting his pack down and removing his coat to let the wind dry the sweat beneath. The pause feels necessary rather than indulgent. As they sit, Michael feels the pressure of responsibility settle deeper. He considers alternate routes, potential encounters, and the limits of what he can promise without words. His past choices surface briefly, moments where hesitation cost others dearly, and he pushes the memory aside, grounding himself in the present. This time, he is not reacting. He is directing the path forward. When they move again, the spacing between them shortens, not from fear, but coordination. Naya walks closer to the horse, matching Michael's stride when he leads on foot, while Tully stays near the supplies, maintaining balance and readiness. The silence between them changes shape, no longer uncertain, but focused, carrying shared awareness rather than distance. As the light begins to tilt toward afternoon, Michael commits to a route that will take them beyond familiar crossings and into quieter land by nightfall. He does not announce the decision, but both women adjust without question, trusting the shift in direction. With each step away from the known trail, the bond between them strengthens, not through words or reassurance, but through the steady agreement to follow the same uncertain ground together. The land begins to open in a way that signals arrival long before the cabin comes into view, the ground leveling out and the wind settling into a steady pull rather than sharp gusts. Michael slows without thinking, reading the familiar shifts in soil and grass that tell him he is close to ground he knows well. He dismounts and leads the horse the final stretch, preferring control over speed, his attention moving between the slope ahead and the space behind him where Naya and Tully follow in measured steps. The cabin appears gradually, not as a single shape, but as parts coming together. The low roofline first, then the dark outline of the barn set back from it, weathered boards blending into the land rather than standing against it. The place does not announce itself. It waits. Michael pauses before closing the remaining distance, standing still long enough to listen for anything out of place, his jaw tightening slightly as old habits surface. He hears only wind moving through grass and the faint creak of what's settling. This is where he lives, though the word has always felt temporary. He came here years ago with the intention of staying only long enough to recover, to put distance between himself and a past shaped by loss and responsibility that went unanswered. Over time, the cabin became a structure that held him rather than a destination he chose. He rarely brought anyone here. Allowing others into this space carries weight he has avoided until now. He steps forward first, checks the door, then circles the cabin, testing hinges, scanning the tree line, confirming what he already knows. When he finally gestures for the women to approach, the movement is small and deliberate, offering entry rather than instruction. Naya takes in the surroundings immediately, her eyes moving over the fence line, the barn, the open stretch beyond, noting angles and distance, assessing what the land offers and what it demands. Tully's attention goes inward, toward the cabin itself, her gaze lingering on the doorframe, the window, the way light cuts across the threshold. Inside, the air is cool and still, carrying the faint scent of wood, iron, and time. The space is plain and functional, a table scarred by use, a stove set close to the wall, blankets folded where they were last left. Michael stands back, letting the women enter first, watching how they move through the room without touching anything yet, as if waiting to understand the rules of a place that has not been explained. Tully begins to organize almost immediately, not out of nervousness but instinct, stacking supplies neatly, setting water to warm, folding the blankets with care that suggests intention rather than habit. Naya steps outside again, drawn to the land, kneeling to test soil between her fingers, lifting her face to the wind, mapping the space in silence. Michael feels something shift as he watches them take shape within his world, not as guests passing through, but as people grounding themselves where they stand. As evening approaches, Michael repairs a loose section of fencing while the women work separately, but in rhythm with him, no one directing the others, no one stepping aside. The sound of hammer against wood carries across the quiet, steady and controlled. He notices how the work eases the tension in his body, how the presence of others does not crowd him but steadies his focus. When the light fades and the cabin warms, they gather without discussion, sharing a simple meal at the table. Michael listens to the small sounds of movement, the scrape of a chair, the soft placement of a cup, and realizes that the space no longer feels held together by routine alone. It feels occupied. The realization brings a tightness to his chest, not discomfort, but the unfamiliar weight of responsibility fully accepted. The cabin stands unchanged, but what it contains has already begun to transform. The morning begins with purpose rather than urgency, the kind that comes from knowing what must be done instead of reacting to what arrives uninvited. Light filters through the single window in a narrow band, cutting across the wooden floor and landing against the table where Michael already sits, boots on, sleeves rolled, checking the edge of a worn blade with careful attention. He has been awake for some time, listening to the quiet shifts of the cabin as it warms, noting the steady rhythm of breathing from the other side of the room, registering presence without intrusion. This is new territory for him, not the land outside, but the fact that the day no longer begins alone. When Naya arises, she does so without hesitation, moving directly toward the door as if drawn by the open stretch beyond it. She pauses only long enough to pull on her boots, then steps outside, standing still for a moment to read the sky, the wind, the position of the sun. Michael watches from the doorway, saying nothing, recognizing the way she takes in the land, not as something to conquer, but as something to work with. She walks the perimeter, measuring distance between fence posts, crouching to inspect the ground near the barn, her focus sharp and grounded. She begins to speak then, not in long explanations, but in short, practical observations, pointing out where water gathers after rain, where the soil holds better than it looks, where animals are likely to pass through. Michael listens closely, surprised not by the accuracy, but by how naturally her knowledge fits with his own. Inside, Tilly has already begun to move things into order, not rearranging but refining what is there. She wipes down the table, places tools where they can be reached without searching, hangs damp cloth near the stove to dry. Her actions are deliberate and calm, reducing friction without drawing attention to herself. Michael notices how the cabin responds to her presence, not in warmth or decoration, but in efficiency. Things begin to flow more smoothly, as if the space itself is learning a new rhythm. They eat together without ceremony, the meal simple and evenly shared. No one speaks of plans, yet when Michael stands and reaches for his coat, both women are ready. Outside, he sets to work repairing the fence line where the posts have begun to lean, driving stakes deeper, reinforcing weak points with wood cut and shaped on the spot. He does not instruct Naya, but she joins him naturally, holding posts steady, handing him tools before he asks, anticipating needs by watching his hands rather than his face. Their coordination develops quickly, built on attention rather than assumption. As the work continues, Michael becomes aware of how little tension he feels. He had expected resistance within himself, some internal warning that he was allowing too much too soon. Instead, there's only focus. His thoughts remain clear, his movements precise. Old memories attempt to surface when his attention drifts, flashes of earlier choices that ended in loss, but the present work pulls him back, grounding him in the physical effort of shaping something that will last. Tilly moves between tasks, tending the stove, preparing supplies for later, stepping outside when needed to carry water or collect stray tools. Michael notices how she watches him when she thinks he is not looking, not with fear or expectation, but with a careful assessment that mirrors his own. There is trust forming there, not complete, but real, built through repeated evidence rather than promise. By midday, the sun sits higher, and the labor begins to show in stiff joints and quiet fatigue. Michael calls for a break without raising his voice, simply setting his tools down and stepping back. They sit in the shade near the barn, sharing water, the silence between them shaped by effort rather than distance. Naya stretches her shoulders and speaks again, this time about planting, about how the land could be used more effectively, how food security will change their position as seasons turn. Michael absorbs the information, weighing it carefully, already adjusting his longer-term plans. For the first time in years, those plans extend beyond his own survival. As afternoon settles in, they return to work with renewed clarity. Michael builds supports near the cabin where crops might take hold. Naya marks rows with careful precision, her hands steady, her movements confident. Tully reinforces the interior of the cabin, mending worn fabric, reinforcing shelves, ensuring that nothing inside feels temporary. The separation of tasks is unspoken but effective, each person contributing in a way that strengthens the whole without overlapping or conflict. As the day draws toward evening, Michael pauses, resting his weight against the fence he has just secured, and looks across the land he once considered a stopping point. It looks different now, not because it has changed, but because it holds more than one future. The realization is heavy, but does not frighten him. It steadies him. He understands that responsibility is no longer something he carries out of obligation, but something he accepts by choice. When they gather again inside the cabin as night approaches, the space feels settled, not crowded, not tense. The work of the day lingers in their bodies, but it is accompanied by a quiet sense of direction. Michael eats in silence, listening to the subtle sounds of the cabin, the crack of cooling wood, the low hiss of the stove, the presence of others sharing the same shelter without contest. He does not speak of gratitude or intention. He does not need to. The work is said enough. As darkness takes hold outside, Michael sits back and allows himself a moment of stillness. He recognizes the shift that has taken place, not dramatic or declared, but undeniable. This is no longer just a place he endures. It is a place being shaped day by day by people who have chosen to remain. The first sign of trouble does not arrive with noise or speed, but with absence, the kind that settles into the land when something familiar fails to happen. Michael notices it while repairing a hinge on the barn door just after midday, his hands steady on the iron while his attention drifts outward, listening for the usual movement of birds along the tree line. The wind moves through the grass as expected, but the smaller sounds are gone, leaving a hollow quiet that sharpens his focus. He straightens slowly, scanning the open ground beyond the fence, his posture calm but alert, the weight of old experience settling into his shoulders. Naya senses the change before he speaks. She has been working near the edge of the field, her hands dark with soil, and she pauses mid-motion, lifting her head to follow his gaze. She does not ask what he sees. She does not need to. The land has shifted, and both of them recognize the warning in different ways. Tilly steps out of the cabin moments later, drawn by the same stillness, her eyes moving from Michael to the horizon, then back again, reading tension in the way his jaw sets. Michael does not rush. He walks to the fence line and rests one hand against the wood as if checking its strength, though his attention is elsewhere. In the distance, a thin line of dust lifts briefly, then disappears, too far to confirm, but too deliberate to ignore. He calculates time and distance quickly, measuring how long it would take riders to reach the homestead if that is what they intend, weighing whether concealment or presence will serve them better. His instinct, shaped by years of escort work and worse roads than this, tells him that hiding invites pursuit. He speaks quietly, his voice low and controlled, explaining only what is necessary. There may be men coming. Not certain. Not yet. The instructions he gives are practical, not protective. Naya moves immediately, retrieving tools and placing them where they can be reached quickly, her movements precise and calm. Tilly steps back inside and secures the door, not out of fear but preparation, checking the latch, setting items aside that could be used if needed. No one panics. No one argues. When the riders finally appear, they do so openly, 3 figures moving at a steady pace, horses trained and well-fed, their approach deliberate rather than hurried. Michael steps forward to meet them, stopping several yards from a gate, positioning himself where he blocks the clearest path without appearing confrontational. He does not carry a weapon in his hands, but his stance leaves no doubt that he is prepared. Behind him, Naya stands within view, not concealed, her posture straight, her presence intentional. Tilly remains closer to the cabin, visible through the open doorway, her stillness signaling awareness rather than retreat. The men ask questions framed as casual interest, their eyes traveling too freely over the land, the barn, the figures behind Michael. They speak of rumors, of people moving through the area, of property changing hands. Michael answers only what is required, his tone even, his words few, offering nothing that could be used against them. He feels the familiar pull of stress tighten his chest, but remains controlled, sharpened into focus rather than fear. He has been in worse positions with less to protect. Naya watches the exchange closely, noting the way one rider shifts when Michael does not yield, the impatience creeping into his posture. She steps closer without being prompted, not to challenge, but to support, aligning herself with Michael's presence in a way that makes ownership and hierarchy impossible to misread. Tully remains steady where she is, her attention fixed on the men's hands, tracking movement with quiet precision. The conversation ends without resolution, the riders leaving with nothing gained and nothing conceded. As they turn away, Michael does not follow them with his eyes. He waits until the sound of hooves fades into the land before releasing the tension he has been holding. Only then does he move, closing the distance back to the cabin, his steps measured, his thoughts already shifting toward the next phase of response. That evening, the homestead operates under a different rhythm, one shaped by awareness rather than alarm. Michael adjusts their routines, suggesting small changes without framing them as permanent, reinforcing weak points, repositioning tools, marking sight lines. Naya offers insight into patterns she has observed, suggesting ways to read movement across open ground, her experience adding depth to Michael's own strategies. Tully adapts the interior space, ensuring that everything inside can be accessed quickly and quietly, reducing the need for light or noise after dark. As night settles, the land remains still, but the sense of threat does not vanish entirely. Michael sits near the window, not on watch in the traditional sense, but present, his mind engaged, his body at rest, but ready. He feels the weight of what he is protecting more clearly now, not as a burden, but as a commitment. The women share the space without crowding him, their presence steady, unspoken agreement passing between them. Nothing comes that night. No voices, no footsteps, just wind and distance and the slow return of smaller sounds. Yet the shift remains. The homestead has been tested, not by force, but by intent, and it has held. As Michael finally allows himself to rest, he understands that this place is no longer defined by isolation. It is defined by what stands together when something threatens to take it apart. The morning after the riders leave does not bring relief, but it brings clarity, and Michael recognizes the difference as soon as he steps outside. The air feels settled, not because danger has passed, but because decisions have already been made. The land looks the same as it did the day before, fence standing, barn quiet, ground undisturbed. Yet the way he sees it has changed. He scans the open stretch beyond the homestead with a sharper sense of ownership, not in the sense of possession, but responsibility. This place now holds more than his solitude, and that truth shapes every choice that follows. Naya is already awake, standing near the field with her arms crossed loosely, her attention fixed on the line where earth meets sky. She does not speak when Michael joins her. Instead, she gestures toward a section of ground where the soil darkens slightly, holding moisture longer than the surrounding area. She explains how planting there would give them a stronger yield before winter fully sets in, her voice steady and practical, focused on outcomes rather than hope. Michael listens closely, recognizing that her thinking extends beyond survival into continuity, something he has avoided allowing himself to consider. Inside the cabin, Tully has altered the interior without drawing attention to it. Michael notices the changes only gradually. Supplies are redistributed to reduce movement. Tools rest where they can be reached without crossing the room. The table has been shifted slightly to clear space near the door. These are not defensive measures born of fear, but adjustments shaped by experience. Tully's expression remains calm as she works, her focus precise, her presence grounding. Michael understands, then, that safety is being built not through barriers but through preparedness. The work of the day begins without instruction. Michael starts reinforcing the outer fence, replacing weaker sections with sturdier posts cut from timber farther uphill. Naya joins him, bringing a coil of wire and offering a method that strengthens the structure without adding unnecessary height. Their movements align quickly, shaped by observation rather than command. Michael feels a quiet satisfaction in the rhythm they establish, each task flowing into the next without friction. It is the kind of coordination that cannot be forced and does not need to be acknowledged. As the hours pass, the land begins to reflect their effort. The fence line grows more secure, the ground near the planting area prepared for seed, the barn cleared of clutter that once felt harmless but now reads as risk. Tully moves between spaces, reinforcing shelves, checking hinges, ensuring that nothing inside the cabin requires noise or light to be found. Michael notices how she works around him and Naya without interruption, adjusting to their pace rather than slowing it. Her strength shows itself in continuity, in the way she keeps the interior functioning smoothly while the exterior takes shape. During a brief rest, they sit together near the barn, sharing water and bread. The silence between them is no longer tentative. It carries understanding shaped by shared effort and recent threat. Michael studies their faces in the clear light, noting changes he did not expect to see so soon. Naya's posture has relaxed, her shoulders no longer held in constant readiness. Tilly's gaze lifts more often now, meeting his without hesitation. These are not signs of comfort born from safety alone, but from trust earned through consistency. Michael feels the weight of his role more clearly than before. Protecting this place is no longer a theoretical commitment. It is a lived responsibility that extends beyond keeping danger away. It means creating conditions where others can plan, build, and rest without fear. The realization brings with it a sense of resolve that feels different from the duty he once carried on the road. This is not a contract that ends with payment. It is a choice renewed daily. As afternoon shifts toward evening, Michael and Naya begin marking the first planting rows. The work is careful and deliberate, each line set with intention rather than speed. Naya explains her reasoning for spacing, for direction, for timing, her knowledge grounded in experience rather than assumption. Michael absorbs it fully, already adjusting how he will structure future days to support what they are building. Tully prepares the cabin for night, ensuring warmth and order without overextending their limited resources. When dusk arrives, the homestead holds a different presence than it did even days before. The work completed is visible, but more important is the sense of alignment between them. They gather inside as the temperature drops, sharing a meal that reflects the effort of the day rather than celebration. Michael sits back and listens to the subtle sounds of the cabin settling, the quiet movements of the women as they finish tasks, the steady burn of the stove. Later, as night fully settles, Michael steps outside alone for a final check. The sky is clear, stars sharp against the dark, the land stretching outward in calm silence. He stands there longer than necessary, feeling the shift within himself solidify. This place is no longer defined by what he escaped. It is defined by what he is actively building alongside people who have chosen to stay and contribute rather than wait to be rescued. When he returns inside, Naya and Tully are already preparing to rest, their movements unhurried, their presence assured. Michael takes his place near the window, not as a guard set apart, but as part of a shared rhythm that now defines the homestead. He allows himself to rest fully for the first time since their arrival, knowing that whatever comes next will be faced together, shaped by intention, effort, and the growing certainty that this life, hard as it may be, is one they are choosing to continue. The shift does not announce itself with a single moment or clear boundary, but Michael feels it as soon as the morning settles in emotion, the day unfolding with a steadiness that no longer feels provisional. The homestead wakes as a working place rather than a shelter reacting to threat. The air carries the muted sounds of routine, The scrape of a bucket against the well rim, the soft thud of boots on packed earth, the low crackle of the stove being brought back to life. Nothing feels hurried. Nothing feels borrowed. Michael starts the day by checking the outer stretch of land beyond the fence, moving farther than he has since the riders came through. He walks without the tight vigilance that once defined every step, though awareness never leaves him entirely. He studies tracks left by animals overnight, confirms the ground remains undisturbed by human passage, and commits the quiet to memory. When he turns back, the cabin no longer looks like a lone structure resisting the world. It looks anchored. Naya is already at work near the prepared rows, kneeling in the soil with sleeves pushed up, her hands darkened as she tests depth and spacing one last time before committing seed. She works with concentration rather than urgency, pausing often to adjust placement, correcting small details that will matter later. The table has been shifted slightly to clear space near the door. These are not defensive measures born of fear, but adjustments shaped by experience. Tully's expression remains calm as she works, her focus precise, her presence grounding. Michael understands, then, that safety is being built not through barriers but through preparedness. The work of the day begins without instruction. Michael starts reinforcing the outer fence, replacing weaker sections with sturdier posts cut from timber farther uphill. Naya joins him, bringing a coil of wire and offering a method that strengthens the structure without adding unnecessary height. Their movements align quickly, shaped by observation rather than command. The work expands outward as the day progresses. Michael and Naya set posts where trellises will stand once growth begins, measuring carefully, adjusting alignment until the structure holds true even under pressure. Their coordination has deepened into something intuitive. He lifts when she braces. She steps in before he signals. Neither comments on it. The labor itself confirms what words would only complicate. As they work, Michael feels a change within himself that he cannot ignore. His decisions are no longer framed by how quickly he could leave if necessary. He finds himself thinking in spans rather than exits, in months rather than miles. He considers where additional storage might be built, how winter winds will hit the cabin, what reinforcements could make the bar more resilient. These thoughts come unbidden, and instead of resisting them, he lets them settle. By midday, the sun reaches a height that brings warmth without comfort, and they pause beneath the shadow of the barn. Water is shared. Food is eaten slowly. The silence between them is not heavy or loaded. It carries ease, shaped by mutual effort and shared direction. Michael watches Naya stretch her hands, flexing fingers stiff from work, and notices the absence of guarded tension in her posture. Tully sits nearby, focused on repairing a strap, her calm unbroken by fatigue. The sight grounds him in a way he did not expect. In the afternoon, Michael begins a task he has delayed for years. He clears space near the cabin for an additional structure, something small but solid, intended not for storage or defense, but for living. He does not announce the purpose, but the act itself signals intention. Naya notices first, asking only what measurements he intends to use. Tully adjusts her work to accommodate the shift, setting aside tools and materials without needing explanation. The decision, once made, becomes shared without ceremony. As shadows lengthen, the homestead reflects a visible transformation. The land shows signs of care rather than survival. The structures stand reinforced not from fear, but foresight. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere carries order and warmth that goes beyond necessity. Michael steps back and takes it in, feeling something unfamiliar tighten in his chest, a mix of relief and responsibility that he no longer tries to separate. When evening comes, they prepare the meal together, not divided by task, but moving fluidly within the small space. Michael handles the heavier work, Naya manages the fire and timing, Tully brings everything together with quiet precision. The process feels natural, unforced, as if this arrangement has existed longer than it has. They sit to eat as the light fades, the meal unremarkable in content, but significant in context. Later, as night settles fully, Michael remains awake longer than usual, seated near the door with a clear view of the land. He does not feel compelled to watch for danger. Instead, he listens to the steady breathing behind him, the subtle movements of people at rest who trust the space they occupy. The understanding settles clearly then, without doubt or hesitation. This is no longer a temporary alignment born of circumstance. It is a life being actively built. When he finally lies down, the choice he made at the trading yard feels distant, not because its weight has lessened, but because its outcome is now visible in every corner of the homestead. The place holds purpose. The people within it hold intent. Whatever remains to be decided will not come from fear or obligation, but from the shared commitment to stay and continue shaping what has already taken root. The final turn does not come from conflict or confrontation, but from completion, the quiet kind that settles after sustained effort when nothing urgent remains undone. Michael wakes before dawn, not from habit this time, but from a sense of readiness that feels unfamiliar and steady. The cabin is still, the stove holding a low warmth from the night before, the air carrying the clean scent of worked wood and soil tracked in from days of labor. He sits at the edge of the bed and listens, registering the calm breathing in the room, understanding without question that this peace is not fragile. It has been earned. Outside, the first light touches the land gently, revealing rows set with care, posts standing straight, fencing that holds its line without strain. Michael walks the perimeter at an easy pace, not scanning for threat, but checking progress, confirming what he already knows. The homestead stands as a place shaped by intention rather than reaction. He feels a quiet satisfaction that does not demand acknowledgement. It is enough to see it holding together. When Naya steps outside, she carries a bundle of seed wrapped in cloth, her movements unhurried, her focus clear. She pauses near the prepared ground and waits, not for instruction, but for alignment. Michael joins her, and together they set the first seeds of the next cycle, pressing them into the earth with measured care. The act feels deliberate, forward-looking, grounded in the understanding that what they plant now will require patience and shared responsibility. Neither speaks during the work, but the meaning of it is unmistakable. Tuli emerges later with tools cleaned and organized, her hands moving confidently as she sets them where they will be needed again. She checks the interior one final time, adjusting small details that ensure comfort and efficiency. When she steps outside, she brings with her a length of cloth she has stitched over several nights, reinforced at the edges, meant to serve as a marker rather than decoration. She offers it without explanation. Michael takes it, understanding immediately that it represents permanence, something placed not for display, but for use. They choose a spot near the cabin where the land opens gently, visible from the door and protected from wind. Michael sets the marker there, securing it firmly, the cloth catching the light without drawing attention. It signifies nothing to outsiders, but to the three of them, it confirms what has already been decided. This place is claimed not by ownership, but by commitment. The rest of the day unfolds with a sense of closure rather than anticipation. Michael completes a final adjustment to the barn roof. Naya waters the newly planted ground, and Tuli prepares the cabin for evening with the same care she has shown since arriving. There is no rush to finish, no urgency to prove anything. Each task fits naturally into the rhythm they have established, reinforcing the structure of a life that now feels settled. As afternoon fades, Michael calls them together near the table outside the cabin. He does not raise his voice or frame the moment as an announcement. He speaks plainly, acknowledging the work they have done, the risks they accepted, and the future they have begun to build together. His words are simple and direct, carrying respect rather than promise. He makes clear that this homestead is not a temporary refuge or a debt repaid. It is a shared home, sustained by mutual choice and responsibility. Naya responds first, her voice steady as she affirms her intention to stay, to work the land, to invest herself fully in what they are creating. She does not romanticize the decision. She names the hardships honestly and accepts them without hesitation. Tuli follows, her agreement expressed through clarity rather than emotion, outlining how she will continue to maintain and strengthen the space they share. Michael listens, absorbing the weight of their words, understanding that this is not a negotiation but a confirmation of alignment. They seal the decision not with ceremony, but with action. Together, they prepare the evening meal, each contributing without division or hierarchy. The process reflects their bond more clearly than any declaration could. They sit as the light dims, the meal simple and nourishing, the conversation sparse but purposeful. Michael feels a sense of completeness settle into him, not as relief from loneliness but as recognition of belonging. Night falls gently over the homestead, the stars emerging without interruption, the land holding its quiet. Michael steps outside one last time, not to check for danger, but to take in the view, the fence line, the cabin light behind him, the marker standing firm. He understands now that the choice he made weeks ago has reached its natural conclusion. What began as an act of refusal has become a life of presence. Inside, Naya and Tuli prepare to rest, their movements unguarded, their confidence in the space absolute. Michael joins them without hesitation, the cabin closing around them in warmth and silence. There are no unresolved questions, no looming threats, no paths left undecided. The homestead stands complete, not because it is finished, but because it is inhabited by people who have chosen to stay. As sleep settles in, Michael allows himself to rest fully, knowing that the future will be shaped not by chance or necessity, but by continued effort and shared purpose. The land outside remains steady, the cabin secure, and within it, a family formed through action rather than words lives in peace, grounded, committed, and whole.